The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of this protracted experience of death, and I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation forever. What's happening? Benton here. Man, it's been an interesting morning so far. It seems like more and more these live streams are mostly serving as like a journal, a spoken journal perhaps. And bear with me, we're still making the egg drinks. And I realize I pulled a boo-boo. I forgot to get the eggs ready. But if, in case she is still listening, or still a listener, I want to offer a brief apology for some unkind words, perhaps, directed towards Miss Leslie. I've been known to shoot my mouth off and speak recklessly. And that's a bit below what I would like for my standard to be. So, and the stream's been privated, so out of some modicum of respect for Miss Leslie. So hopefully there's no hard feelings there, but I thought that was important to mention. And not much sleep. Woke up quite early, 10:40 p.m. actually. And with the time change, I spent quite a bit of time on Central recently, and we're back to Eastern. So in fact, as far as my body's concerned, that's really more of a 9:40 p.m. But then I've begun to extend my bedtime, so I think maybe 3 hours of sleep realistically. And we did a bit of cutting off our nose, the royal we's nose, to spite our face, and I'll get into that in the context of the journaling, Mr. Benton's audio blog here. And I pretty much already did the podcast aspects with respect to spiritual type topics, spiritual, in my head, laying in the rack, facilitating the peristaltic movements of the intestines. So that's going on. Something's going on down there. It seems to be healing. And then I did manage to doze off for a brief time. I had some quite strange dreams involving my father and my mother, but the aged version, although not elderly, but the post-divorce. Still somewhat youthful appearing, but still old folks, if that makes any kind of sense. And I'm pretty sure that goes along with the healing as well. I would chalk up, and then I've been having some struggles with the interior climate controls and versus the external temperature and the fluctuations and spending a lot of time in the -6, -8 territory, and then, the single digits. And when it's below freezing, but it's, like 28 with the sun shining on the winders, that's a very different environment. So I believe the engine probably ran unnecessarily this morning to a great extent. So I think what I'm figuring out is when it's really cold, the truck it idles the engine less for heating and cooling, or heating in this case. But because the truck seems to have a diesel fired heater as well as an electric heater. So it seems like when it's really cold, it automatically fires up that diesel fired. But it's seemingly like it doesn't turn that bad boy on unless it turns the truck engine on at, what somebody from Arkansas like me would think is cold, but realistically it's like daytime, 28 degrees. The engine's been hot, so the temperature sensor on the truck thinks it's like 50 degrees. Well, there's no reason to turn on the diesel fired heater. So I woke up cold, cranked that up, maxed it out. The truck fired up right away, but it ran for several hours. But the battery needed to charge anyway, so I guess that's all right. I don't know. Still figuring it out. Ain't no telling. All right, bear with me, folks. We're attempting to multitask. It's difficult for me as that can prove. But yeah, we sat here like a bozo, not cracking eggs, but I've gotten pretty quick at it as long as the whites cooperate. I'm trying to work on, hopefully I will make some sort of commitment to doing these live streams, maybe in a little less harsh tone of voice, perhaps, or more pleasing intonations. So I don't need to be venting. I don't necessarily need to be venting anger and frustration all of the time, as we've seen. That certainly those forces do come to bear variously, but I think it's sort of taken center stage lately in my own mental review of the material. And this is a performance, on some level, as mundane and pedestrian as it may be. But yeah, I basically refused to work yesterday beyond a certain point, and that was part of the spiritual, podcast, and what I went through, and emotional. It's been quite emotional this morning, and again, I attribute a lot of that to the healing of the large intestine, but went through some minor forms of guilt and just I've let the fuel in the truck, the fuel level, get lower than I normally would. Some brief worry about that and sort of some problem solving, but realistically it's 160 miles to the next Loves, and as it stands this moment, I have more than enough fuel to get there, but between the cold and the style of driving in these mountains, and idling the truck and all of these things, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It doesn't really matter, but it is what it is, which means nothing. And then we get into preference. My own preference would have been to get unloaded for the first drop yesterday, which was the plan. And then that fell through. but then it seemingly became a possibility in the early afternoon. However, by then I had declared that most likely I was done for the day. And as much as I do backslide at times, um, stuck to my guns in this case. But and realistically, even after I demurred and chose not to make the delivery, and instead that's what's causing me not to be able to be driving right now, because combo breaker. This is one of the rare mornings that um, I'm not rolling out of the truck stop first thing. Where's my lighter? Light the stove. That's a preference, but ultimately, which again, it delays the start of the day, which then lengthens the day as well. But based on the amount of sleep I got last night, it doesn't really matter. Uh, you know, at a certain point, if I'm not tuckered out, it is hard just to get. I'm getting quality sleep, but it can be difficult to get more than 3 to 4.5 hours of it. Now, the thing is, I'm assuming it's going to be fighting the traffic most of the day. But again, I'm a truck driver. I can't really complain about that. And count your blessings that I've avoided and gotten been fortunate lately, right? Things have been relatively easy in the context of busting my ass and really working hard. But that's the thing about trucking. The driver can bust his ass and work hard and encounter way more annoyances and energetic drains like traffic and such, or in this case, being sent out into the middle of nowhere in Virginia. And hilariously, and I actually did about an hour yesterday in the afternoon talking about some of this stuff. And much like the Epstein and all of this, just it becomes such a quagmire, and with so many ins and outs, and absurdity really is the order of the day, in my view. Just the sheer absurdity of many of these things. And the reality is that the people that work with this company that I'm allowing to employ me as a contractor, I mean, they simply don't care. And probably nor should they. If I end up getting sent to the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, and because of my own time management, although in this case they literally hid the address from me, which I don't know that that's what we've gotten into. But so, and I know this is sort of convoluted the way I'm telling this, but I think it's instructive. And certainly the romanticizing of trucking, and my grandpa was a trucker and this relative was a trucker, and then to attach those positive feelings, especially ladies are bad about that, to attach those positive feelings. This ain't that. And you know what, when your grandpa was doing it, it wasn't that either. Let's just go ahead and call it what it was. The love wasn't for grandpa's job, trucking. The love was for grandpa, not for. Now, if he seemingly loved trucking, well, that's sort of a different thing. But I don't know that transitive property really comes across. And maybe it was more worth grandpa's time, and maybe he was less disrespected than white nigger Cooley Benton in the absurd humiliations to which Benton continues to subject himself. And what's Benton's motivation? Well, first and foremost, to have egg time, right? To have this plastic shelf full of these plastic drawers full of all of these accoutrements of making my fancy health drinks, and then various supplements and tinctures and all of these things. And then ultimately, unless there's certain things that could happen that would, cause me not to have access to such items. But, assuming that the protections and blessings continue, which, that would be my, I don't know that expectation is the right word, but, it seems unlikely that anything beyond annoyance is going to occur, that would prevent me from, even as annoying and frustrating as, a lot of these undertakings are. It's doable somehow. And that does seem to be what this place does, this realm. It's like this never ending struggle for dominance and power, and, extracting more and more out of an individual such as myself. And they figured out that, old Benton likes an attaboy here and there, good job, but only when it's been earned, right? And only when appropriate, not just all the time. But so, and remember, I said no to this, the LTL portion of this load, where we picked up what's supposed to be a full truckload. And, which reminds me, there's somewhere in here's a seal. It's been so long since I picked this thing up. I don't even know what I did with the seal, but I'm assuming it's still in here somewhere. I need to look for that. So when I got given the load, I was given an address in Worthington, West Virginia. And so when I punched it into my GPS or Google Maps, it did not bring up anything, which is quite rare. That does not happen often at all. It's fairly unusual. And I even found like the company website and all of this. And so I began to, and then the bills of lading. I've never seen this in, my somewhat extensive truck driving experience. There's no address on the bills of lading. It just says Worthington, West Virginia, right? And of course, by then I'd been talked into picking the thing up, and it was too late. Now maybe there's a lesson about sticking to one's guns, but the reality is, on the phone they told me, well, hey, the load that's on the truck, that's all fine and good, but we're really just breaking even on that, which is true. But, my retort would have been, well, yeah, but y'all are the one that did that. Like, I'm not involved in the dispatching of the loads, and, what's the difference to me, right? But then I'm going to need to sort of pick my spots to duke it out with the company and battle these folks. If I make it, if I make their lives too hard, their so-called lives, at a certain point they will let me quit, which maybe that would be for the best. But and then again, with my increasingly sensitive internal space, just whatever I'm feeling as I discuss all of this is a lot of repressed stress, right? I really feel it in my tissues. You know, the panic attacks that were just never really acknowledged, you know, over many, many, many years, that sort of stacked up the stagnation of those energies and, you know, being deposited into the tissues seemingly. And a certain, you know, just even thinking and talking about this, as most likely some of that stagnated energy now sees an opportunity to heal and clear, which is also seemingly one of the uses to yours truly of these, you know, whatever this is. I don't know what you want to call it. Stream of consciousness. I mean, it's all a cope on some level, right? But, you know, observing the changes in my breathing, and you know, what a blessing to have, you know, gotten even to this level of mastery. And it is mastery. Just the management of my emotions yesterday alone, um, certainly is a level of mastery that probably would have seemed impossible for Mr. Benton. And then, you know, reminded to say my, for lack of a better term, prayers, you know, 30 minutes out from, you know, as I was going to the delivery, and then turning off of the main road in this little town, and just like, well, you know, we're either going to make it or we're not. You know, it's just, it's a commitment. There's no, once I made that turn off of that road, it was just like, well, it's in so-called air quote God's hands now. And a few minutes later, you know, the road narrowed, and I started seeing a sign, 1-lane bridge, and, you know, a local fella who also happens apparently to be a local truck driver appeared and let me follow him up over the ridge, he said, and through some very challenging, you know, my skills are up to the task, but, you know, I would say, and I don't really know these drivers, but at this company, but I got to guess you've got 25 to 30% of these drivers for this company, which I think we've got pretty good drivers, it seems, would have gotten stuck or potentially rolled down into a holler. Like, no bullshit. A West Virginia holler. And I was actually on the phone with the owner while I was still driving. And I said, I don't know if you can see my camera in real time, but, you know, and I took a little time to brag on my driving skills. I said, you know, you got a percentage of truckers out there that they would not get out of this. Just, they wouldn't get out of this. They'd either refuse, and you'd have to call the tow truck, or you'd have to call out another driver, or, you know, they'd get stuck or roll this bitch, you know. And then with the just-in-time freight and the decade after decade after decade of foreign drivers, and, you know, the further exploitation of labor, and that's really what we're talking about. You know, again, the American dream to do more for less. Well, part of that is the compression. You know, it's allowed the compression of the pickup and delivery times, so that, you know, realistically, it's not feasible. And if you look at when they told me about the pickup versus the almost 2 hours or the minimum of 90 minutes it took to drive, Um, and then now I'm running over tall curbs on the way out because not that I'm in a hurry, but I'm not taking some of not physically being in a hurry, but just making choices within what is known to be a compressed time frame, to not take my time driving to see, oh, it looks like a gigantic intersection, but there's tall curbs and it's, not really designed for trucks. And then, oh, now I'm going 1 mile an hour watching my trailer tandems go up and over something it's not designed to go up and over. To then, like when I started with the mega carrier, they taught us to, every time we got assigned a load, to sit down with pen and pad and write out a trip plan. And, err on the side of things taking longer than you think they will. And then I think we trip plan based on 45 miles an hour. And that's how much time is built into a lot of these loads. Well, now almost everything they give me is a compressed time frame. And I'm never told, like, hey, you have to make this delivery on time. Versus some of the time it's like, yeah, well, this is the appointment, but then if you're late, it doesn't matter, right? That information is withheld for whatever reason. So in trying to say no to this second part of this, these two drops, at a certain point when I finally was able to do the trip plan, which I believe was after I picked up all the freight, I was like, hey, I'm looking at the drive times and the GPS. I said, it's not fit. I can't, it's very unlikely I'll deliver, because the main load was supposed to be delivered yesterday, and that was just effectively impossible. And then, now it's actually going to be, it could be delivered tomorrow afternoon, but the traffic would really have to cooperate. So probably you're looking at Wednesday morning. But even then, it's in New Jersey, pretty close to New York City. And it's just too tight. There's going to be too much traffic. So, again, it's one of those facilities where I won't really know what I'm dealing with until I get there. It could be some just total backing nightmare. So again, I don't feel rushed, but it's like everything's a big goddamn hurry. Even trying to fuel today, it's like, if I'm really going to bust my ass and try to get all this freight off, these two drops, I mean, there's not even really time for, 30-minute breaks or fueling the truck, really. And of course, there's no Loves anywhere nearby, or I would make sure to fuel up off the clock, right? Which is a no-no, but apparently the government doesn't give a fuck anymore. I know they were quite strict on such things. But with the merger of the corporations and the government, I would expect to see over time, you're going to have more and more consolidation, and the big boys, their systems won't even let the driver fuel unless he's on duty. Right. So as of right now, this company doesn't have a safety department, and there's nobody around to figure out if I'm off duty when I'm getting fuel. It's like I've been with several companies. It was just like, oh, the fuel card it will not let you get fuel unless you're on duty. Period. End of story. Oh yeah, what am I doing? Hang on, fucking up again. Oh, there it is. Preheat this bottle for round 2. And, so back to the spiritual aspects and the emotional aspects and the worry and, a little bit of guilt, not much. But, the reality is, if I had just kept my mouth shut instead of shooting my mouth off and just being like, hey, I'm done for the day, leave me alone. Um, Now, part of that is, I have to put my foot down and stick to it at a certain point if I'm going to keep saying no to things, but then backslide. That's a kind of a delicate balance, because at a certain point, and see, here's the punishment and the negative reinforcement is, in a way, I'm training them to understand that I'm erring on the side of doing everything they ask me to do. So when I say no, they need to pay attention. But from their perspective, they're dealing with a bunch of complaining ass. They're dealing with truckers as a group. And the vast majority of these truckers, they complain about almost everything and they try to negotiate almost everything. And, so part of my strategy, is to just sort of take all the beatings, right? But then when I just finally say no to something, I just want to be, and this is going to sound some type of way, but, supported, right? Or that's not even the right word, but, if they want to say, well, okay, just understand that the company's taking an L on this financially, but, we value and respect you enough to listen to what you have to say, because we understand, based on your work history with this company, that, you tend to just take everything that comes your way without really complaining about it, and, to us anyway. And, working hard and getting everything done properly. So, out of respect for you, we're going to say, well, that's okay with us. But just understand this is not ideal, because now your dispatchers, that cuts into his commission, right? And, the company's not going to make a profit. But then what happens when the company is structured in such a way to blindly send Vinton out into the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, which that should already set off the alarm bells, and for everybody, myself included, and it certainly did for me. But I've been sent to what seemed like the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, enough times, and it worked out. But this is the first and only time I've ever turned off of that main road, and I've done enough driving in Virginia on these 2-lane highways to realize, like, that's, you're usually okay until you turn off that big road. Or it's not even a big road, the 2-lane main road through town. It might be a state highway, it might be a county road. Once you leave that onto a smaller road in West Virginia, all bets are off. And I already knew that. And I got to the point of decision and just said, well, I mean, we've already accepted the freight, and here we go. And the chances of my GPS actually giving me a route that's just entirely impassable for a big rig is almost zero in my experience. And it was technically passable. And so, but without this fella showing up and clearing the way in his pickup truck, and he had to stop and turn around multiple people. And so assuming I didn't roll the rig or get stuck, if I'd gone through there on my own. And remember, if I need to stop and check the map, or there's nowhere to stop. Like if I stop, some of that's 1 lane and I'm just blocking everything, right? It's pretty much a no-win situation in the final analysis. But again, people can poo-poo this idea of Jesus Christ as Lord till the cows come home. If that's what I choose to call the local in the pickup truck showing up out of nowhere, and he seemed a little angry at first, but then the next thing you know, he's all affable and friendly and guiding me out of there. And I think this still took about 45 minutes. Now, you're looking at probably 2 hours if I had to do this on my own. And then that's just assuming that I didn't get stuck or rolled the rig over. and, a nightmare in a ways, right? And this is where Benton's courage also comes into play. Like, I'm not nervous, or, I'm up to the task. But, and this guy told me, he said, yeah, I've seen a bunch. He said, like, first things he said was, you'll never make that right turn. He said, I've seen a bunch of them try it. And see, I still think I would have made it, but he might be right, because if my tire goes onto that snow, I don't know what's under that snow, but he does, because he's local. So maybe, because sometimes on a narrow road, if you put half a tire off that surface, it's done. You're done. It's just over. Once that tipping point is reached, it's just, well, you either can yank this bitch out or with the tractor, or you're just done. And I mean, like, while you're still rolling, if the driver doesn't know to romp on it and just hope for the best, that opportunity's lost immediately. But, and the company all the company can concern itself with is money, right? Which says a lot about the world of death and the game of lies. And that's what they were talking about yesterday. And, I had a discussion with the dispatcher about that. He's like, hey, this is how I make my money. So he knew when he booked the load that they might be pulling some bullshit with what turned out to ultimately be a fake address, effectively, because it doesn't. If you punch that address in, it's a mailing address, apparently, but this is so rural that, like, there's no way that I would have ever been given that address if you could punch it in, because eventually they gave me the coordinates, and it's just like a shop, right? But then the coordinates they gave me is to a shop in a completely different area. But the physical address I found through Zillow, because it's a house just down a normal road, in West fucking Virginia. And at a certain point, I started taking screenshots of my GPS software, because these bozos were still trying to get me to go back in there in that same area with that big rig. So I took a screenshot and I said, hey, do you see all those little roads, and you see all those names of towns around the little roads? I said, there's where they sent me, and where I've already been once today is in the middle of all that. So you can, and I only zoomed out a little bit. And so the roads that the trucks can go on are pretty small, because, you have one interstate on the screen for sort of scale. And then the smaller 2-lane roads are, highways, state highways mostly, but some of them are U.S. highways. And then everything inside of that is just a single line, like a single gray line that you can barely see. And he's still not arguing. It's just his motivation is his paycheck. And he knows he can always fall back on, well, the broker lied to me. So, however, now we get into stupid or liar, because he either doesn't understand his job, because the alarm bells should have started going off when it was, West Virginia, and we don't have a good address. So we're just going to load the freight up and figure it out on the fly, right? Meanwhile, if there was enough time, I would be able to stop, do research. He would be able to do research. We could confirm the route. There's just no time for any of that. Realistically. And, I can't, there's nothing to do. And this is part of why there's no live chat, because I know at some point I'll look down at that live chat and it'll be a whole bunch of, and I'm being hyperbolic, but there will be suggestions on how to defeat this. Well, why assume that what I'm saying is something that can be defeated? Right. To me, that's a mistake. Where a person starting with the premise that, well, whatever objections Benton comes up with, they are overcomable. Right. Well, I'm calling bullshit. That is gaslighting, by the way. And so part of the reason why there's no live chat is because it's quite often serves the function of gaslighting. Now, whether that's the intent of whoever's typing down there or not, I ain't into that. And I refuse to internalize. And at a certain point, this dispatcher started talking to me as if, because see, they always default to, well, you're the driver. And, what they're sort of implying is it's up to you to figure all this out. But then it's, also up to me to prevent these problems. So such that when I attempted a thing that's, very close to impossible, or let's just effectively impossible, now it's going to be blamed on me. And I just said, I'm not taking the blame for any of this. And when I called the owner, I said, hey man, I'm not mad at nobody, and I just want you to know that I said no to this. I attempted to say no to this. And I said, when I was on the phone with him, I told him, my gut is telling me, I said, every time I've said no because my gut instinct was saying, hey, don't do this. I said, it's never not been a disaster. That's what I told the guy. And then he still talked me into doing it. And I knew he would be able to. I mean, this guy's a very good salesman. And and again, I know what the economics are like in trucking. He's right when he tells me it's a wash and it's, just basically the one load just pays for everything. So ultimately, the company's got to attempt to make a profit, even as a lot of companies are just merely trying to break even. Right. And a lot of those are the ones that are going out of business, because they make their money in the good times. And then when it goes into a freight recession, they end up, because when the rates are high, you've got a big margin for error. So, as soon as you're looking at 4 years of a rate recession in freight, yeah, they can go a year, 2 years marking time and not make it, just breaking even, which even that's a best case scenario, right? Many are losing money. And then now you've always had trucking companies go out of business, but this is something different. And here's the difference. What's happened historically is it's been cyclical. The rates go up, the rates go down. The rates are bad for a year and a half. They improve, right? They become less bad. No, this is permanent. It's just folks have not accepted it in trucking. And if we look at it logically, the fact that it's in the past, the rates have always, and they call it the rates recovering, right? The fact that the rates have always recovered in the past, that has nothing to do with whether or not it's possible for the rates to go into the toilet and stay in the toilet. Right. Because remember, these are the same people who just assumed, oh, well, look, the government's cracking down on the illegal drivers, so therefore the rates have to go up. Well, no, they don't. That's not how markets work. And this is not emotion. This is business. And markets simply do not function that way. That's how a human functions. A human functions that way. The markets function in part on John Nash game theory optimal mathematics. Right. So ultimately these people are playing chess. I'm sorry, they're playing checkers against and don't know that they're actually playing a game of chess. And what's making the ultimate determination is some version of Bobby Fischer as world chess champion, right? Playing damn near perfect chess, right? And that's how the market functions, to perform over time as near perfectly as possible mathematically, right? For efficiency and all of these various things. And then the systems, the human side of it is for the criminals to steal as much as possible, right? And then so some of that theft is in the form of, oh, let's bring people from other countries who will work for less money under, worse conditions. And then so now my work conditions are worse and my pay is lower as a result. So, and that's stolen from me. Well, I knowingly entered into an industry that steals 10% of the miles I drive. They just steal it from day one. So the whole thing's crooked, right? And in fact, it's a scam. So when you go into a game of lies in a world of death, the broker lying and withholding and obfuscating and tricking with respect to the address, well, that's just normal. That's just what they do, right? So really what you see is the company is just as big as scumbags as the brokers, right? And the brokers are definitely scumbags. I mean, some of the worst people I've ever met. Before I ever thought about driving a truck, I got to know some brokers, freight brokers, just some of the worst people I've ever encountered. They weren't bad to me, but I could just tell these are just absolute garbage humans. And that was many years ago. And so the reality is that a person working, his paycheck depends upon where he can convince me to go and do. And a lot of times it's like, oh, this load plays like a high amount of money. Yeah, that's because everybody else that could or would potentially haul it understands that even for a high price, it's a bad idea. But, oh, well, we've got a Benton and, we can just send him out there and, maybe it'll work out. And, this is kind of a long way around to get back to the point of, in some way I have to train them, or I feel like I have to train them, bloody their nose enough to realize, hey, when I say no to something, it has a meaning. Right? It has a meaning. It's not just, oh, I'm cranky or I'm in a bad mood. Right? Yeah, I understand I probably seem emotional at times. This is not that. And I explained it to the dispatcher. I just went down the list of red flags of why because I told him no. I just said, it's a hard no. I'm not doing that. And then, of course, I knew the owner was going to call and most likely talk me into doing it anyway. And I didn't hit him with a told you so. I just was like, hey, I'm not mad. We're not going to argue, but I just want to remind you that I said no to this. So just whatever that's worth, sir. Take that for what it's worth. And, I just realized I did the wrong thing here. I did the wrong thing. Oh, no, I didn't. I did the right thing. But see, they don't care because they can't care, because if they did care, they couldn't do their jobs, right? They can't do their jobs and simultaneously think, well, that's Benton, that's one of our valued drivers. And before we just willy-nilly send him out to, a national forest in West Virginia, right, or a state forest or whatever it is, we got to verify that this is a good idea. you know. Well, that's simply not in plans of this world. This world don't play that. And, you know, Americans have been brainwashed and, union bad, right? Oh, well, unions are corrupt. Yeah, of course they are. Guess what? So is everything else, as we see. What isn't corrupt? So if I say, hey, because the reality is, if there were unions, a lot of what I'm expected to do just wouldn't be possible, because the union would say, well, we don't send our trucks into those type of situations. So I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to, find a cross dock and put it on a smaller truck. Right. But until somebody puts their foot down and says no, it'll never happen. And remember, the people who ordered this load are, up till the last minute, we're still trying to have me try to go back out there on them same roads. And so now the dispatcher, seeing a potential sliver, a crack of light, is also trying to get me to do that. And if I'm dumb, and most truckers just won't say no to anything, and it's completely insane, right? But if there was a union, wouldn't be possible. I would just say, hey, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm calling the union, and we'll see what they think about it. I'm pretty sure it's in our most recent contract that was collectively bargained that we don't do this. So, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. But see, the laborer, and this is the white nigger coolie aspect. I have no representation. Nobody other than myself will intervene on my behalf at any point. Right? It's not going to happen. So it is every man for himself in that respect. And then realistically, again, a little bit of the just thoughts this morning and whatever I went through emotionally and spiritually around, oh, well, I still could have, because what happened was they said, oh, well, we'll just send it to my buddy's shop and unload it there, which, who knows if that's even doable. I could get there this morning and it's just like, oh, we thought you had this could easily happen. I could get there and they say, oh, we thought you had one of them lift gates. We don't have a forklift. We don't have a pallet jack. We don't have this. We don't have that. And a lot of this LTL freight has dried up. You saw Yellow Corp went out of business. Well, they were the biggest LTL carrier. And I know some of the other big ones, they've laid off a lot of people. And see, some of that's union. I think Yellow I think their drivers were union. And I know at least one of the other big boys is union, the ABF or whatever. Maybe, say there's 4 left. I'd say probably 2 of the 4 are union. And so now, LTL is less than truckload, and they have 53-foot trailers, but they also have doubles, which are like 28 feet or whatever. So on the interstate, you mostly see them hauling, double trailers, but shorter trailers. Well, they can just, if they need to deliver to that shop in West Virginia, they can have like a shorter trailer with a lift gate, like a 45-foot trailer, just single trailer, 45-foot with a lift gate. Or if they know the place has an actual dock, or they can get the freight off, they can send one of those double trailers, just one though, right? No problem. So it's very possible that I'll get there this morning and they're just like, well, you're the delivery guy. Like, you got to, and this is what could happen. Like, they could say like, we refuse delivery because we can't unload this. And see, I'm talking to the dispatcher about this second location that now I'm going to this morning. And it's like, I told him I don't even see a dock because he said they've got 2 docks, and I said I don't see a dock. And then it's like, oh, they're roll top doors. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. That doesn't mean anything. Like, what are you talking about? Right. I mean, this is the level of, this is a sharp guy. He's not a dummy. So again, now we're back into the stupid or liar. And, how dumb do they think I am? Because that doesn't mean anything, you know. And once I'm there, it's just like they can just choose to make it my problem. And then economically, what happens if they ordered this stuff a month ago and the broker hasn't been able to get anybody to pick it up, and then the price keeps going up and going up and going up, and then eventually, oh, here's Benton with the freight. They'll just make it my problem, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I live in the truck. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to the truck stop. And so yesterday was a version of that, which is, hey, if you're going to make it my problem, I'm going to the truck stop. I could have died. I could have been killed out here rolling down into a holler, where the locals, they're long suffering people who are, good hearted folks in a lot of ways, but meth vultures will show up and pick everything clean, including my bones, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is. And not that I would be in any danger of crime, but it's just like, life's cheap, man. This is one of those life is cheap type places. And, I'm from a life is cheap type place. And it's like, oh, well, that's just what happened to that fella. He always rolled his rig down into the bottom of the holler, now he's passed away. Oh, well, that's just fucking what happened. There's no crying for me, Argentina, in that respect. And that's what it is. I know the score. Well, this dispatcher, he's never in that situation. He didn't know what was going on. He set all this up and then, took his daughter to the doctor this morning or whatever, which is fine. But, I'm the one out here left to try to get all this done for relative peanuts. I mean, yeah, I'm happy with the amount that hits my account, but based on what I'm doing out here, it should be double, but it should, I mean, realistically, 1.5x. My paycheck should be $2,700. I mean, really, but as we know, they're just simply not going to pay truck drivers that much. And like I said, they send foreigners out there on these type of jobs because I've helped a bunch of people, a bunch of truckers get out of a bad situation. He said, what I really hate is when they don't speak English and I can't help them because, if they can't figure out that I'm offering to lead them out of here, then, I just at some point have to leave. And he didn't say this. This is what I figured out. And then I just have to leave and just whatever happens is whatever happens, And I could see on the locals' faces as we, they pulled over to the side to let me get by. This shit happens all the time out there. You can tell. So now whoever's at the little shop, their world is, well, people do order fucking tractor trailers out here. Yeah, what's that got to do with me? I don't understand, because there's a consensus of bozos in the realm doing bozo things. So now I'm somehow obligated to be a bozo. It's just not logical. Oh, well, we have, and that's part of the gaslighting of the realm is to be born into this thing. And the fact that all of this is seemingly happening, society and employment, and education, and family structures, church, government, school, everybody sort of assumes from a young age that that is a validation, simply the fact that this all seems to be happening. Yeah, it seems to be happening. And that's based on waking dreams, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again. And it's all quite absurd, right? The idea of even, I wish I had a way to show you the screenshot. right now, but just when I look at what they were trying to get me to go do and what I survived, it's abjectly absurd. I mean, there's no other way to talk about it. I'm going to look at it again just to um, refresh my memory. Yeah, it's just I'm looking at a picture in the town. I don't know how they pronounce it, but it's spelled Buckhannon. And now whether or not that's Buchanan, I have no idea. But Buckhannon. Um, I think that's the town where I turned off of the main road, and then so you've got basically, if you think about like a square of jagged, narrow, windy West Virginia 2-lane highways. But, a couple of them I see several different U.S. highways. I see a couple of state highways. And then in the middle of that, so there's towns on every one of those highways. There's town names, small towns. And then like inset is like some small towns: Alton, Alexander, Selbyville, Helvetia, Pickens. And those are like Alton. And I didn't zoom out very far. Like Alton, there's no road to Alton as far as my truck or GPS is concerned. So you can't go to Alton at all in a truck. And like there's a tiny, windy road with switchback after switchback after switchback going to Alexander and Selbyville, right? And Helvetia and Pickens. And then so north of that is Ellamore and Mabel, same situation, although you can't even get to where Mabel, you can get close to Mabel. And then where they sent me is in the middle of all that. Maybe I can show this. Maybe my camera will show. Hang on, let's see where we're at. Camera. Maybe this will show. Kinda. I think you can get the gist. So if you see the bigger square, that's all U.S. highways. It's not really going to focus, but then if you see those, the screen turned off. If you see that, it kind of makes almost like an oval, those names, like these names here that you can't read. And then those other names. Where I went is in all that nowhere. And they attempted to send me back there. And then I'll show you this also. This is the satellite view. The same exact thing. I mean, it's just completely, dude, a lot of people would hesitate to drive a car in there. They sending me in a full-size sleeper cab, 53-foot drive. It's just total insanity. Right. And, especially with what I'm talking about at the level of, using consensus to sort of validate the reality to make it seem valid. The company can now talk to me as if this is just more or less the normal course of things. And I'm like, well, this is insane. So, and I'm right and they're wrong, but they're never wrong because of the consensus of things. So then if you extrapolate that out and apply those same concepts to whatever's going on in the news cycle, and as we know, the current big news is all this Epstein, which I'm doing my best to avoid it. Even emailed me something about it, and I just said, hey man, I'm not putting any more of that type of imagery in my brain. But I said I do want to say that Alex Jones was covering all of that type of information 10 plus years ago, and he was talking about a lot of that sort of thing in detail. And I said, furthermore, a lot of a lot of those type of activities connected to satanic ritual abuse are in, Fitz Springmeier's How the Illuminati Create a Total Undetectable Mind Control Slave book. Sex slaves and all of this, and Manchurian candidates and whatnot. And then finally I said, I would recommend that you, and he didn't ask for advice, and I rarely give it, but I said, I would recommend that you write this down and you burn this into your brain. And if you have to, write it on a piece of paper and put it somewhere that you'll see it every day. There is simply no end to what the American people will tolerate. Meaning what they have tolerated, what they are tolerating, and what they will tolerate in the future. And which brings us back to that consensus level. So that's what happens. That's what happens with all of these news items, like the Epstein. Is it all gets run through that gamut. Gets run through the framework of consensus, right? And NPC normies normalize everything that is not incongruous, as we know. I'm looking at the clock. How early can I get out of here? Because we're still waiting to leave, but and so the system understanding and again, Moloch's machine gets to claim credit for devising the very psychology, of the individual, and that's my way of acknowledging something that Leslie talks about. She has her own way of approaching the mind and thought and all of this, but that's my way of approaching it, is the psychology, and so contained within the concept of psyche or psychology is the person's, the makeup of the brain functions of, thoughts are generated however and wherever they originate from, don't really care, right? And then they're experienced, again, always accounting for waking dreams, surrealistic unreality, by the individual. And then that's all within the framework of Moloch. It's like a computer, Intel inside. Well, this is Moloch inside. So part of how I dealt with, the emotional side of all of this morning was to recognize it's like, whatever's going on within me with these thought processes and these emotional processes, that's largely the product of this realm and, this machinery. And it's all designed to neatly fit in with the, corporately addressable work unit, right? Each human is a corporately addressable, discrete work unit. And so, yeah, it's great to have a place to lay this is a constant theme over here too. As much as I, enjoy preferentially having this space and having money in my pocket and being able to purchase, food and supplements, ultimately all roads lead to a complete and total Christ-like surrender, right? To just don't know where my next meal's coming from, don't know where I'm laying my head, don't know where I'm going, don't know what I'll be doing when I get there. Because the only way to know those four things is to engage with this realm in the context of the Moloch designed, propagated, and the psyche of the individual. That is the product of this system of things. So the only way to operate, outside of that context is to simply, and not in a rebellious fashion, not in an obstinate, to just merely separate oneself from that which is the Christ, that is Christ on the cross, right? That's Christ choosing, right? Or Christ living a specific, based on specific principles in the context of a world of death and game of lies, and then come what may. See? So Benton's still in the phase of picking and choosing to some extent, if that makes sense. And at some point, and, I've talked about it, so, I'm always free to just walk away from this rig. Now, that would most likely mean I would never drive a big rig again. Well, is that altogether bad? Because, if I'm actually going to, at some point, completely divorce myself from the concept of employment altogether, well, that would most likely mean no truck driving unless I find a way to do it outside of the context of money and tax paying, right? So that's kind of interesting to think about, if you ask me. Check the battery here. Shout out to however many brave souls are listening to this. Certainly, you are brave, or if not exactly brave, it's certainly to your credit, I would say. And so, what really, and again, we talk about the quickening spirit, and we talk about inform shall prosper. So, Abin was seemingly forming this morning, and I'm thinking my way through it and emoting my way through it and processing my way through it. The answer came, which is something I talked about recently. Oh, you can't start your shift when you want to? Good. Oh, the company will never have your best interest at heart? Good. They'll always try to extract more out of you? Good. Just because things have gone in my favor recently, and I've done live streams talking about, part of that is sort of the realm itself lulling me into a false sense of security only to rug out from under me. See? Well, if I always pull out my own rug, you can't pull the rug out. See? Why should I be rug pullable? For what? Now, if I incorrectly value whatever I'm getting out of it, see, and this is all based on, so my own interactions with the company and the way they dispatch the loads, that gets tied in with John Nash game theory optimal, and the owner of the company to make a profit, as he seems hell bent to do and determined to do. It's for him to strike that perfect balance of, what can I get Benton to do versus what will cause him to quit for the third time, and then, probably the third time's a charm, and probably quit anyway. And believe me, yesterday I was just, again, it's like, well, do I have to quit? And I don't threaten it. It's just, I'm thinking to myself, well, do I have to quit again? Right? Like, what is this? But then, if I do, what am I going to do? And then it's like, okay. Now we see what's bothering you. You don't want to lose your precious food and supplements and your solitude of the out of the truck here. Well, and so to quickening spirit, one can't be attached to, in the long run. In the short term, it's fine, but in the long run, one can't be attached to those notions. And I'm now realizing I was going to take a shower in order to keep my face. And to do that, I need morning. think I'm going to skip it. And I think I might just bust. I don't really need a shower, so I might just bust up into a Love's and shave my cut my beard off at some point, maybe today. And so a lot of this is a reminder that, as because it's not really rush hustling and doing a great. I probably need to be taking my time and just, hey, we tried our best and we didn't get there today. And they're like, oh, well, you stopped, for groceries, or you stopped, when you fueled, you were 5 minutes or whatever. And it's just like, okay, that's what that happened. Because remember, these are the same people that will send me out into the middle of West Virginia without a, and they'll, after I say, stick me into, going and having freight loaded, and it's going out in the middle of nowhere. Right. It's nowhere near Worthington. I can tell you, it's where they tried to send me and where I'm going today. Neither one is anywhere near Worthington. The Buddy Interstate is like 20 miles from Worthington. And the place I tried to go to yesterday is like 80 miles away, or maybe 100. It's insane. This is a insane world of an insane game of lies. This world can't provide sanity. Not possible. Right. And so some of my own problem of improper identification, because the reality is, like it or not, I've been seeking to make meaning out of these things that we're discussing that they don't mean anything. It's all quite mundane, trite, and like I tried to say earlier, and I didn't quite finish the point. So much time may have passed from the time they ordered these products. If a job falls through, if the pricing changes, if they start shifting their business focus, they might not want this stuff anymore anyway. Right? But then maybe their relationship with the vendor is not good enough for them to just cancel it. Right? Maybe they owe money. They might not really have an option, but maybe they know, well, when the shit shows up, if the guy doesn't have if he doesn't have a way to get it off the truck, well, now we've got a convenient excuse to just, and now, again, whose problem does it become? But it's my problem. Because all my distance is, I'm going to call the broker and see if they'll approve a cross stock. Well, we already know the answer to that's no. Never, ever had a dispatcher say, I'm going to call the broker and see if they'll approve a cross dock, which means we unload the freight at a dock and they pay for it. It's never going to happen. Now, it will at some point, but that'll be the first time I encountered it. So, then it's back to being just like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm going to the truck stop. Y'all tell me what you want me to do. Right. Saying, those same people are saying, well, yeah, the coordinates we gave you where your truck was supposed to go, that's the forklift or the pallet jack or whatever to actually unload the truck. We don't have any of that up at my buddy's shop. We just assumed y'all had a way to get this off the truck. And I'm telling you, these people don't give it. They just don't care. They're not going to care. If that's now, again, may not be the case, but and again, add this to the 20,000 reasons of why most people would never do this job. Because, at a certain point, somebody's a new driver and just doesn't understand that this is very much within the realm of possibility. Like, and I already know, it's like, oh yeah, this could absolutely be what I'm in store for this morning. So it actually reinforces my decision to call it a day early yesterday, because it's like, okay, now I'm back. Now where their shop is, there's a pilot truck stop that if I had gone back there yesterday, I guarantee you would have been full by then. It's so tiny. And meanwhile, if I had gone, there's two pilots, and I went to the one but I had no way of knowing that they're going to have me take it to this other location. Meanwhile, I drove past that other location not once, but twice yesterday. And so this shows you the breakdown in communication. And the fact is, the dispatcher can be on top of all of this until he's blue in the face, but he can't, there's not enough time in the day to cover everything. And then, he's playing a game where if he spends the least amount of time possible and I pick up the freight and I happen to figure out how to deliver the freight without him ever researching and, checking, because he knows once he starts looking into where they're sending me, he might conclude, oh, well, we can't send our truck there. Now what? So part of this is he's covering his ass to do everything he can to try deniability. Except old Benton is rubbing it in their face. Like, look, man, this is, this would never be in the company business model as we send trucks. It's like, this is crazy. And, not everybody will take a screenshot, text it to the, the phone number I have for where they send me my loads and we communicate, right? I just take a screenshot and just, showed you guys, I texted that to that number and said, explained what it meant and said, this is crazy. I just said, this is crazy. I typed in, this is crazy. Because you can't even, unless I go into an image editor and draw and like drop a little point and say that's where they're sending us, I still have to describe, hey, you see the outline of bigger roads, and then you see all those tiny roads, and then you see those names. Where they're sending us is in the middle of all of that, right? AKA, not civilization. If the business model is we send trucks there, then I can't work for this company. Like, not that I'm being disagreeable. Like, no, it's not an option. It's no longer an option to work for this company. So, like when I quit ART Transportation, because they dispatched me on just a totally unacceptable load that I would never years. That's what I told the dispatcher. I said, take that load off of me immediately. And, they're sensitive. He's 30 years old at the time, Gen Z or a younger millennial. So, they don't like to be talked to this way, but fuck them. And, I texted it or emailed him and I said, listen, man, if there's one load available and it's Sunday afternoon, but the load causes the driver to quit, that's the same thing as no loads available. Right. But he knows that if he doesn't schedule me something and I could conceivably pick a load up, and his fleet manager might have checked the load board and saw that load, when this guy comes in Monday morning, it's going to be like, hey, man, why didn't you dispatch that truck? Why did you wait till today? And all he cares about is covering his ass. Right. But in my world, well, if you give me a load and I refuse it and I quit over it, then that's the same as no load. It's no difference. That's effectively no load available. And as drivers, without representation, without an advocate, such as a union. Oh, unions are corrupt. Yeah, so's the trucking industry. So's every trucking company I've ever allowed to employ me. So is the government that, uh, regulates all of this. So why are we putting our foot down with the union's corruption? Why is that where the buck stops? Why does the corruption buck stop at a union? See, well, because that would then the politicians that work for the banks and the corporations, there's less money for them to steal because now the union, as it captures better working conditions and more money for the workers, now some version of Jimmy Hoffa gets to steal. See, they don't like that, right? The work will be performed for the price dictated by the corporation. And that work will be performed under the conditions prescribed by the corporation, no matter what. So now we get to the people believe, because remember, the people have internalized Epstein. Okay. So when you see your fellow humans today, I want you to remember that's an Epstein internalized. Right. Why is my dad emailing me about these lurid descriptions of things being done to children? Because that's what the system has decided it needs individuals to internalize. And the moment the individuals are willing to internalize, they become that, even if they don't perform that. See? And now, whether or not those actions are occurring on a systematic, widespread basis, the horrors visited upon children potentially, to what degree that is happening, has happened, and continues to happen, the moment the populace internalizes it, well, now it's baked into the cake. See? That's all that's required. So when you do see unions in certain ways, it's because for whatever reason, those individuals internalized it, and then it became part of the consensus, as far as people were born and their father worked for the union and told their sons, hey, play your cards right, and you'll end up with a good union job. But then it's been decade after decade of, well, the unions are corrupt. Yeah, of course they are. So is everything else. So how could corruption be the union buster? And if anybody remembers school, they spent a lot of time teaching us about unions and the efforts of union busting, right? Well, now the system figured out the most effective way to bust the unions are just to call them corrupt. And Americans, at the level of lip service and at the level of what they can be accused of, hate corruption. See, the people don't realize that they are responsible for the corrupt government. The government is corrupt because the people are corrupt. See, but everybody, when they talk about these things, and everybody, when the Epstein becomes so in your face it can't be ignored, now it's, oh my God, the corrupt government, oh my God, this. No, oh my God, the corrupt individual. And now we're back to Christ, the resurrection of the risen, ascended Christ within. Jesus Christ is Lord. See, this can't happen if that's the internal state of the individual. See? And that is the solution. I've applied the solution. But then it immediately gets attached to religion, and that's corrupt and man-made and demonic and wicked. So it has to be an individual attainment outside of the context of religion. And society cannot and will not facilitate or support that. And now Benton facilitated it and supported it on behalf of himself in his own so-called life by inserting himself into homelessness and walking the earth like Caine and Kung Fu to some extent in order to till the soil, right? And to eventually uncover the righteous, perfected path that lies within, and to have developed enough in the meantime that when the path was finally uncovered, to be capable of walking it. That's what happened yesterday. It was to be able to get through the day without just being a total basket case, without calling up and cussing everybody, without yelling at the locals, without the cops having to be called, just all of these things, right? And to also pray or to offer it up, right? Or whatever you want to call it, sacramentally, perhaps, and to ask and ye shall receive, to invoke, right? So if there's an idea of, well, there's these, and again, take from the Epstein what is valuable. If there really are these, witches and warlocks and these demonic entities, and all of this is happening, and it's tied into the government, and it's tied into political systems and corporations and banking and finance. Because I don't look at a lot of articles, but every time I do, Larry Summers' name gets mentioned. And if you don't remember him from the bailouts, you don't know anything. I hate to break it to you. If you don't know off the top of your head who Larry Summers is, I mean, there's really, there's no reason to even mention 0809 again. Because there's lessons in 0809 that you never bothered to learn. And this is not to insult you or shame you. It's to merely show that there's no end to what the American people will tolerate. It doesn't matter that the entire world's global financial system was bailed out mostly by the American taxpayer in 0809. It doesn't matter, because Americans are showing that they're not able to, and they're unwilling to learn those lessons. Because why? Because they will not do better individually. They simply will not. And nobody and nothing can make them. Meanwhile, it's not even in their short-term interest to do so, arguably, because the system has already programmed them to immediately start blurting out, well, I've got to feed my family, or how are we going to pay our bills, right? And there's not one word connected to the Lord Christ Jesus in the Holy Bible, in the English language version, the King James version of the Bible, having to do with, well, how are we going to feed our children? How are we going to clothe ourselves? Right? Other than, don't concern yourself with those things. Okay, great. How? See, and I'm a big proponent of this. Anybody can go around making a pronouncement. Hey, man, don't worry about how are you going to feed yourself and your children and clothe yourself. Okay, how do I do that? How do I not worry about that? See? So my job was to go inside myself, take stock of whatever was going on in there, resolve whatever was resolvable, and to eventually prepare the way for the practice of not concerning oneself with those things. But not in a fake it till you make it, in a, oh, those things are abjectly absurd, and those ideas are all connected to lies, death, demons, corruption, aka this world that can't ever contain meaning. It can't ever provide justice. It can't ever become abundant. It can't ever provide love. It can't ever be tolerant. This world, right? What it can do is take from you whatever you're foolish enough to give to it, such as me foolishly driving a big rig. I mean, at all. This is foolish to even be doing this. This is the foolishness of an individual. So I damn sure better be, alchemizing and, transformatively transcending within myself and working with various energies, to eventually extricate and rise up out of this. Right. Because now we're just down to basic things around, okay, if I don't drive a truck, where do I go and what do I do? And at a certain point, it's just like, yeah, well, don't worry about that. Okay, how? I don't know how to not, and I'm not really worried about it. I have a lot of I trust. You have a lot of trust that I'll continue to be guided, protected, blessed, and all of these things and put in place. Right. So in some ways, it's probably the system keeping me truck driving, because in some way that keeps me from, just a complete commitment to just, I end up wherever I end up under whatever circumstances I end up. It's just whatever. And so it doesn't ultimately matter. And see, that is the solution, because, and it's only the solution for me because I'm not involved in anybody else's solution or lack thereof. Because as my intestines were doing that peristaltic movements, pushing the waste through the intestines in real time, as I was coming to a new understanding and accepting things and looking at them in a different light, I could feel that was what was, that was the appropriate thing. And that's the literal gut instinct. That is intuition, and it's 100% accurate. Right. And so I had, my actual intestinal processes saying, yeah, man. Yeah. You feel how you felt kind of bloated, and you could feel the movements. Well, it feels a little different now, doesn't it? It feels a little easier. It feels, things are moving along in a less restricted way. Right. And that's my body letting me know, hey, buddy, you're on the right track. Keep going. See? And that's the movement. The movement's never outside there. Right. How come there's actual physical movement within my internal space? But there's not, I see no effective movement outside of my internal space. When you talk about, uprisings or organizing or people working together, everything I see collaboratively is tied up in making people miserable. Right. And the Epstein stuff is just sort of the latest version of, and if it's the loosh farming and all of these things, to humiliate what used to be, somewhat patriotic Americans. And I'm telling you, these people are pissed the fuck off. But anyway, that's enough out of me. Bye.